take it that more will join, but we're going to move on because we recognise that your time is very valuable. Just before we start, just to let you know that we're recording this session, and it will be we will send it to everybody as a recording later, so just to be aware of that. So I'm going to start. Erasmus Plus is a European programme, as you all know at this stage. We have, well, I need my little clicker. Sorry. So, Erasmus Plus, two different types of funding, centralised versus decentralised funding. Centralised funding is Key Action 3. It's managed by the EACEA. There's an annual call each year, but we have our role in this, the national agency role in this is to promote the programme, Key Action 3, but we have no say in the actual selection or the funding. The second side then is decentralised funding, and this is managed by the national agency in Ireland, and in Ireland this is the HEA. There are two national agencies in Ireland, just for those who don't know us. One is the HEA and the other is Lurgas. The HEA only manages higher education institutions. The other actions like adult education, vet, schools are all managed by Lurgas. The programmes that we do manage are Key Action 103, European and EFTA country mobility, Key Action 107, international mobility, and Key Action 203, strategic partnerships, which are cooperation projects. The HEA itself, for those of you who don't know us, the HEA leads the strategic development of the Irish higher education and research systems, with the objective of creating a coherent system of diverse institutions with distinct missions, which is responsive to the social, cultural and economic development of Ireland and its people, and supports the achievement of national objectives. The HEA has a statutory responsibility at central government level for the effective governance and regulation of higher education institutions and the higher education system. We're also the funding body for higher education institutions in Ireland. And with that, we're going to move swiftly on to Key Action 107. Within the limits of the budget, there are two. Key Action 103, the applications themselves are based on numerical data which are included in the application form. The historic performance of the higher education institution is also taken into account, but it is the staff of the NA who allocate proposed funding, which is submitted to an evaluation committee for approval. There is no qualitative aspect to 103 in the application form, so we have to look elsewhere for this. And this is why it's done by NA staff and not by evaluators. Funding for Key Action 107 then is based on both quantitative and qualitative data from the application form. It is sent to independent external assessors, evaluators, who assist the NA in assessing projects in terms of the quality of the project. Assessors, while you may suggest a cut down in the budget, the NA reserves the right to make the final decision, and this is because we have to take into account the geographical spread in terms of the HEIs in Ireland and also the countries within the region. So if you have two applications that come in for China and Nepal from a particular institution, and China gets the higher results, this is just an example, China gets the higher results, but we have no fund. There's been no funding for Nepal. It's a new country, it's coming in, and another application has Nepal but has lower results. Then the NA reserves the right to actually fund Nepal instead of China. And Mariana will go into the different budgetary regions, and she will give you some flavour for the regions where we get a lot of competition and regions where we don't. Okay, and now that's just a flavour of it. As an external expert, you are expected to inform us of a conflict of interest. So if you work for a higher education institution that has an application in, or if you are partners with a higher education institution that has an application in, what happens is we will just take that away and give you another application. All information related to the assessment process is strictly confidential. How the assessor will review the applications. Well, what we would like you to do is to read the whole application carefully before completing the quality assessment. For benchmarking purposes, maybe read a couple of applications and then go back to the first one and score. Impact written feedback is a requirement. Please frame it positively. So, and we have had instances where assessors have put in things that are kind of quite personal, so we'd like you to keep that out of it. Frame it positively. Don't say I think, say and the assessor thinks or the author thinks. Don't put your own, don't make it personal, because this feedback will go back to the HEIs. Your name won't be, we will not give out your name obviously, but the feedback will go back to the HEIs, and it's done so that next year if they don't score high enough and get funding from us from this application round, that they can come back next year and apply your improvements, your suggested improvements to the application for next year. Impact and dissemination is one that the assessors over previous application rounds have come back and said, look, you know, people could do better, or institutions could do better in this particular area. So tell us why you scored it low and how the HEI could improve it for next year's application. You must use OAT to actually score and give feedback, and Mariana is going to run through that with you at the end of this session. What you've received so far, briefing sheets for assessors, and that's this, I hope you can see it. So it's this, Mariana would have sent you this. There's some things on it that you should ignore. One is don't applications that score below 70% may get funding. 70% is not the Irish National Agency's threshold for getting through to funding, because there are regions where the application mightn't be, you know, as well written as in others, but in that particular budget region there may be no other applications. So just to be aware of that. Please also apply the principle of proportionality. So one institution, as I said at the beginning, read 3 or 4 applications before scoring, but take into account that you might have a university and a smaller, yes, most of them you would have a university, but you might also have their smaller college. So the principle of proportionality, it should be introduced here, so that you might kind of go, well, okay, it's not maybe as good as the application from the university or vice versa, but it is a good proposal. So please take that into account as well. Don't use decimal points when you're putting scores in. Don't use half points. So don't put in 0.5 because OAT doesn't like it and we can't use the 0.5. So Mariana will come back to you on that. This is a very good document, and actually it comes from the Icelandic National Agency who ran a training course on this. We have taken out this document. The original document is much larger. There's a lot of paper in it, but we've actually stripped out most of it and we've given you what we think you will need. Now, having said that, we are always available to you by email or by phone if you're not sure about something. So the briefing sheets go through, again, a bit of an introduction, just like I did for the centralised and decentralised actions. Your role as an expert is in there. There is also why you need to use the OAT tool. If you're further down it, you will see you are required to use only the award criteria defined, and there's 4 award criterias. The scoring range per award criteria and actions. So for key action 1, mobility projects in the field of higher education between programme and partner countries, the relevance of the project, the maximum score is 30. Quality of the project design and implementation, again, maximum is 30. Quality of project team and cooperation arrangements is 20, and impact and dissemination is also 20. And underneath that, then you'll see that there's, you won't see it now, I'm not expecting you to, but you'll see it gives an idea of what you consider a very good score, what's considered good, fair and weak. So have a look at them. You might have already have done this. Okay, so again, we would recommend that you read through this very quickly. If you have any questions on it, please come back to us. There is a little bit of reading in it, but it is a good document. And as I said, we've stripped out most of it and left you with the relevant parts. So coming back to this, you've received the briefing sheets for assessors, which is this document. You've received application forms assigned to you. You've also received the new HEA supplier form. Now, without this form, we can't pay you. And even if you have been an assessor on previous calls, this is something new and this is something you must fill in. What you will receive is a conflict of interest form. It's not forms, it's forms, sorry. And access to OAT. Next steps, Marianne's going to talk to you now about the budget per region. She's going to give you some OAT training and OAT, and she'll explain that. She's going to tell you the rate per application form, and the applications themselves must be assessed and returned to us no later than the 3rd of April. There is a process after you come back to us with your application forms, because we have to look at the budgets. We had to look at the regions, we had to look at that geographical spread, and that takes some time. We have to have our selection committee on the 27th of April. That's the deadline, and we're actually obliged to meet that deadline. So it might seem like we have 3 weeks. We don't actually, because there are quite a few steps before we get to that selection committee. This is the budget per region, and I'm going to hand this over to Marianne now to go through this with you. Okay.
Good morning, everyone. And just before we go, because we're going quite well on the time, does anyone have any questions? If so, you can actually type the question, or just I'll type it here for you guys. Just any questions just before we move on to the budget and training, any questions that might relate to everything that Mary presented so far. There's a lot of typing going on,
Okay,
which is
maybe
great. I don't know if they want to say like.
Or let them speak. It might be easier to speak, you know.
Okay, guys. So I unmuted you all. I don't know if you actually have a mic. I can hear Quifa. Good morning, Quifa.
Good morning.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
All good.
Participants actually have to unmute their own mics. That's what I had to do.
Okay. Oh, that's good. So everyone else. So for now, Quiva, fire away with your question, and then I saw that Lorenzo also has a question. So
it's just a very simple question. Are we going to get this presentation at the end?
Yes.
Excellent. That's fine, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Quiva.
Perfect, Quiva, thank you.
We have Mary Armstrong in the room with us as well. So just to, sorry, my back was to you when.
Lorenzo then, good morning.
Good morning. Just simple question about evaluations and criteria. What about repeated descriptions in the projects? I mean, if we find description repeated country by country, should we just elaborate a formula to evaluate them at in the same way, or I mean, should we give exactly the same evaluation? How do you work out this?
Well, to be honest, some of our institutions, and the bigger ones especially, would be copying. They won't copy everything, but they will copy things like impact and dissemination, or how they're going to manage the project. So if they're in those two areas, that's okay, because we know it's the one person that's actually doing. She will be the person that's coordinating all of this, so she's writing it. If it comes to the actual country itself, how it links to strategy and to the strategy both of the HEI in Ireland and also to their partner HEI, that shouldn't be a copy for each country. Does that make sense, Lorenzo? Is that what you're asking me?
Yeah, actually. Now, the point is that obviously there are some technical things that are repeated, and this is quite normal. But then normally when we find, I mean, usually I'm Italian. Who doesn't know me? Maybe everyone. Just to be clear, and we do assess a lot of application, and bigger application has got just a standard repetition on logistics and on a couple of items that appear frequently in the evaluation form, in the application form. And I mean, it happens that we should normally find a kind of a way to say that there should be original application for each country, and that country by country, some topics should be specific, I would say. So what I was asking actually, Mary, is that if you think we should just elaborate a common formula in order to say, is it better to fill in the form in an original way, country by country, or if we are free to elaborate such kind of formula and then put it in the assessment. And finally, if when I find the same piece in the application form, if I am bound to give the same vote, or if I can just elaborate a specific vote country by country in order to understand just in case I do recognize that there are some places and some things that could be adaptable and some others that are not. I don't know if I just explain what I mean.
I think so. I think we're coming from the same. We're coming about the same thing, just from different ways. I would expect that the first relevance is relevant for the country, the higher education institution, and their partner. I would expect that to be different from China and Nepal.
Okay, fine.
Now, when it comes to managing the project, I could see from the same HEI that they would manage the project from the same way.
Okay.
It's not, because we're signing the institution, it's not an individual signing up to this, it's the institution. So I would expect that an institution is behind these applications and they're saying, this is the way we're organising this mobility. Does that make sense, or am I?
It does, of course, but what I mean is that I do expect also that if you say make the same process, for example, for logistics for China and Algeria, which is possible from your point of view, from HEI institution, then the logistic part from China and Algeria should be written in a different way, because obviously they've got different needs. So this is what I do expect from the application.
Well, and I get where you're coming from, but here we wouldn't put much emphasis on that, because Jerry, and it's something he's been arguing with the European Commission, that type of logistical management of it is, even if, China and Nepal are two different countries, how you manage it, the kind of structure of that management, who's managing it, could be the same. So that's his opinion, and that's the way we've done it, Lorenzo, for the last number of years. So
okay, fine.
If we reckon if it's a good institution and they have good structures in place and good kind of management processes in place, then that follows true for each country. It shouldn't be different, but the relevance, definitely, the quality of the project has to be there. There's no point having good management and processes in place if the first two qualitative areas are not good enough. Yeah.
Great.
I
Okay.
also take into consideration, Lorenzo, that some of the applicants, this might be their third project. So, and then some others might be their first project or their first project within a specific country. So in some instances, I guess in some institutions you might even see some differences from country to country because they face different challenges in the logistics. But then that does not mean that an institution that is applying, for example, a big institution included a new country and they think the logistic is the same as country X, but then they come to realize through the management of the program that it is different. So it might reflect in some countries. Some other countries might be the same, but one reason could be that it is the first time they apply to that country. They are not familiarized with the logistics, but that does not necessarily mean that they.
You don't assume that they have a co-projection projection process. I mean, they do not fill in the filling form together, or in a way consulting each other.
And in some institutions, it's a centralized process. Okay. The application is written by one person, and that's usually where you see that duplication of, because the process not only of applying for it but also managing that is down to one person. She's writing it, and I'm saying a she because we know it, one example where it's a she. She writes the application, she goes to the individual lecturers and professors and this is what you want to do. She writes the application, but she also manages the entire project. So every mobility that comes into that institution comes to her desk at some stage. And one of the institutions you have, I know for definite, has that type of situation. So it is the same person, whereas in another institution, while the institution is signing off on it, it might be individuals that are writing for each country, so the management will look different. It's not to say it's any better than someone that's writing the same thing but it's just different. When you start reading them, you will get a feel for them as well. As you know yourself, you will nearly start to kind of go, okay, there's a pattern here. It could be that you're saying there's a pattern here and it's not good enough. So you will mark them down at every instant. Or it could be a case that you say this person or this institution knows what they're doing. I'm marking this high. Does that answer your question? That's the best I can do with that. Because as I say, our attitude here is if you can manage one, and remember, Lorenzo, for most of these institutions, we now have historical performance data. We know from the queries they send in to us, whether they actually know what they're doing or not. Mariana can nearly tell you, this institution, we've had problems with them, this is why, and usually they're the ones that get audited, so we're out with them and saying, okay, so we're expecting something like that. But if you're not, as I said, we will be delighted to talk through it with you, anything that you might want to raise. We're here for that. We will be here.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
On that,
question.
Yeah, thanks, Lorenzo. On that, I'll go back to you, Fiona, on your question, but Quiva asked they're very important on what sort of priority should be given to repeat or continuing projects. On your end, as assessors and evaluators, unless they mention that on the application, you won't be judging on that, but that's a criteria that we take into consideration on our end, because we would have been exposed to the project and to their final report for, let's say, for the first year of the project. So unless they mention it, you wouldn't necessarily have access. I mean,
this is where the historic performance comes in. Yeah. So there's two institutions where both have, one is done this before, back to us, a proven record, and then someone that comes in new, unless we're looking at the geographical spread and European priorities and also national priorities, we might make that decision and say, okay, two institutions, one continuing one, we're going to give it to the continuing one, and this is why. So we do look at those things, but you won't have to, worry. You're just assessing each application as if it was a brand new. They can say, oh, we've done this, we've done that, and that's fine, because everybody can say that. And because they could be involved in other European projects, not necessarily 107, so they might have experience. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
What is the view? Annexes?
Fiona, and then we go back to Frank, because I see that Frank has his mic there. Fiona, good morning. She says, what's the view of the use of annexes? So I believe you were talking about the annexes that the institutions attach to their application.
Mariana, what I was specifically saying is if normally within applications they have a specific space to put the information, and they have to be concise enough to get their information into it.
Yeah.
But I think within this, if I read correctly, they are allowed to put additional information into annexes. So I'm just asking whether, what is the view of doing that? Because usually people are penalised if they can't put their information concisely
Okay.
in the application form.
In some instances, because I know of some applications, in some instances they maybe annex it something to prove or to support their strategy or their partnership with the specific institution. There were some other cases where institutions they had two or three departments applying for mobilities with country X, and in those instances, because they have two different relevance, two different partnerships, this space wouldn't be enough. And in that case, in some of those cases, DNA actually advised them to refer to an annex, to add an annex, but just on those cases. If you see that it's if in the application they received, it's just a lot of information and it went on to an annex, I mean, you could penalize in that sense. But I know, for instance, I don't remember off my head if you got the application from this specific institution, but I know there were more departments, and DNA advised them to mention that there were 3 different projects within that country and to add the annex in those cases.
Okay, thank you.
Anything to add, Mary?
No, and maybe afterwards, Fiona, we can let you know if yours was that institution, so that you're kind of aware of it. We can let you know that.
Okay. Can I ask another technical question as well?
Yeah.
If I'm assuming that an Irish institution cannot be listed under the partner countries.
No, but no.
Okay. Fine.
It will be in there because you see, for the, there's one institution. Well, actually, there's 2 that would have affiliates.
Yes.
Abroad. Or maybe have schools or a campus.
But it could be
abroad.
even a case of they are applying because a kind of they shouldn't have mentioned, but it's not a consortium, but it is a kind of a.
Put it this way: if there were 3, I don't think there is any, but we'll have a look. We'll have a look at the 2 that we know of, and again we'll have a look at your ones to see if they're in there, if that's okay, because
that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
We'll come back to that.
Frank, I see your mic there. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm wondering if the institutions were advised of a limit as to how much they could write about individual applications. I'm looking at 2 of mine. One of them, for some sections, said they could give no information because there was no space to do so. And they had a total of 66 pages in their application. But another one I'm looking at has 250 something pages of information.
Yeah.
Was there any limit set by the HEA?
No, we don't have a limit because they're not our forms, Frank. The forms are designed by the EU, so the only constraints that could be put in there are, from a technical point of view, is from the EU, but we don't say to them no. There's no instructions to the HEIs to say that they don't have, that there's a limit on the number of space, a number of pages or
Yeah,
paragraphs
yeah.
or words. There isn't. The only constraints is the application itself.
Yeah, the characters in
Yeah.
each of the fields, so it's not determined by us at all.
Okay.
You can now, if you go and you read something, I mean, it's supposed to be clear, concise, and coherent. You know, if someone is waffling, and I mean this in the nicest possible way, if someone is waffling on for, 90 pages that they could have done in 20, well, then, you might kind of say to yourself, well, do they really need to do this? And if they're doing this, are they going to be able? It depends on the area it's in. If it's in the management of it, maybe not so much, but yeah, it depends on the application.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so just I see Anne Molloy there, your mic is on. This will be our last question, otherwise we go for too long, and then you can.
Okay. It's just going back to the question previously about the partner HEI. Just in one of my applications, like for instance, the contact details for the partner HEI are in Ireland. So it's just maybe I might just ask a question about that could be checked.
So we check the
Yeah, we
application
check
for
that
you.
for you.
Grant. Okay. Thanks.
Back to you on that one.
Grant. Thanks.
I just say that all of these are eligible applications because they've sent in their application on time and there's been a signed declaration of honour. So we will have a look. It's unusual to find a partner in Ireland, so that wouldn't have come up in our eligibility check. So you can take it that they're eligible applications.
Okay.
We tell you they're not.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've gone through the eligibility check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. Okay. Thanks.
That's what we need. Yeah. That could be just a typo or a mistake. Someone was rushing.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But we'll have a look at it, Anne, and we'll come back to that one if that's okay. Yeah.
Grant. Thanks.
Yeah. Great.
Okay then, guys. So just to go on now on the presentation. So here we have the budget per region, and I just thought it was important to share that with you. I mean, first because of course we were evaluating, but just also because some of the regions, they received more applications than others. That does not mean that you have to be very soft on the applications for DCI Central Asia and Middle East. Let's say Central Asia, Azerbaijan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. So we have less applications because maybe our HEIs do not have long partnerships or collaborations with with institutions in those countries. That does not mean that you have to be softer, but also we want to encourage partnerships with those countries. On the other hand, then we have, you can see on the presentation on the darker orange envelope of regions where the applications exceeded the budget available for DNA. An example, DCI Asia, so the likes of China, Indonesia, India, DCI Latin America, so Brazil, Mexico, Bolivia, Peru. Industrialized America, so US, Canada, and industrialized Asia, so Hong Kong, New Zealand, Australia. Those are 4 regions that, as you can see, they are heavily subscribed. So you'll be talking about 5 applications for 1.
So ratio of 5 to 1.
Yes. So in the case of US and Canada, and then so in those cases, what Mary was saying earlier, you might have, for example, in DCI Asia, 3 applications for China and 1 application for Nepal. Maybe Nepal has an inferior, or they didn't score as well as the applications for China because there's a stronger backup on the partnership with China. But Nepal is a new country, is not as explored, so DNA reserved the right to then, if Nepal is scored lower, to fund Nepal. So we want, let's say you all are assessing applications for China and Nepal. China get all the top scores. That does not mean that we are going to fund just China, because there are at least 10 countries under DCI Asia. I can also send you the breakdown of countries, but just for you to bear in mind when you're looking at your applications. And the same for the other regions. So Eastern Partnership, so Georgia, Belarus, Ukraine, they are all oversubscribed. The same for South Mediterranean, Russia, Western Balkans, South Africa, and African, Caribbean, Pacific states. So they are all oversubscribed. There is competition in all the regions.
I suppose I'm going to stop it there because we're going to run out of time.
Yeah.
Just to say that you will, as an assessor, you will mark the application based on its quality. Afterwards, we will look at the kind of the individual countries within each region to see that there is a geographical balance and a country balance. So you don't have to worry about it, but we're just bringing it to your attention so that, you know, when we tell you the overall results, that you're aware that that's what we're doing. It's not that your institution didn't get through, it's just that, you know, your application wasn't funded. It's just that we have to do that balance. So we will send you this, and we might flesh it out a bit more, because for someone that hasn't done this before, that might be a little difficult to read.
Yeah.
So we will break it down in a little bit more detail by the end of this week. Yeah?
So we move on, because as Mary said, we're running out of time. Mary mentioned earlier that all the assessors must submit their assessment in OAT. So OAT is the online expert evaluation tool. It's a web-based application made available by the EU. So it is a central tool that will link all your assessments to the main EU tools, and will come to us. So there's no paper submission of that. So I'm just going to change the presentation here, turn it to OAT. So you are going to get, after this presentation, as Mary said, the conflict of interest form and access to OAT once you submit that conflict of interest form. And when you get access to OAT, you then be able to see what I'm going to show you following here. So you're going to get started. I'm going to send this presentation to you all. You all need to have EU login. So the same email that I sent it on to you, that we've been corresponding so far, is the email that you'll be using to create your EU login that will allow you to access the OAT. When you get access to OAT, that's the screen you're going to see. So there'll be a list of projects that were assigned for your assessment, and they will have a code similar to 2018. 1EA, so on and so forth. So you'll be clicking on assessment list, and that will lead you into the specific project. You have to bear in, when you enter the assessment list, you see the details of the application, the details of the HEI, and the three
Criteria.
the three criteria there. So look at the general information, with the general information on the project, application and annexes. You can download it. There will be the application as well, but you already received the application. And then there will be the award criteria. The screen. Just bear in mind that this one on the presentation, I think it's a strategic partnership. But the OAT will show you the 4 criteria, and the space in there is where you're going to put your written feedback for each one of the criteria. there are other other headings where it relates to overall comment. So if you want to make an overall comment to the participant, to DNA, or comments on the budget, as Mary said, you can suggest a cut down on the budget, but DNA reserves the right to consider it or not according to the budget and according to
and geographical spread, but also national and EU policy. Just to remember on this one, when you are putting in comments, as I said, make it about in the second person. Don't put in "I think," because then we have to go in and clean it up. And we want to use your words, we want to use your terms and your language. So we don't want to have to, kind of go in and then edit it. And also maybe to break it down, and don't say something like, oh, you need to improve on your impact and dissemination, and then just leave it there. You need to say what was good, what was bad. As I said, there's a reason for this. It's so that next year these applications, the quality of these applications become better, not just for the applicant themselves, but for you as assessors actually assessing them. We want to increase the quality of applications. And just to let you know that next year, at the end of this year, we are going to bring our applicants in again and do a further training course with them with an outside expert. So we do this every 3 years, and we did it the first year. It's due again. And we can see that it's kind of coming back to Lorenzo's point about this kind of duplication of information. We see that creeping in again, and other kind of quality, other aspects of the application form that are not there at quality where they should be. That's not for all of them, but just for some institutions, and we'd like to kind of stem that tide and actually reverse it so that there are more quality applications, because this is becoming more and more competitive, as you can see from the budget results. But I let you move on because we're actually now running out of time.
Yes,
so.
Fiona, you asked there what are expectations for feedback in overall comments to applicant. Unless you feel that there's an overall comment, because your comment, your feedback on each one of the criteria, and Lorenzo is right, it's 4 criteria. The feedback you're giving there, it's the one that's going to be sent to the participant anyway. So as Mary said, don't be personal on your assessment, because the feedback in the criteria is what is going to be sent.
I'm just going to interject there for a minute. Imagine you were the applicant. Imagine you put all of this work into this document and you don't get funding, and you want to know why I didn't get funding and how I can maybe go about this for next year. So that's the type of feedback we'd like to see. It doesn't have to be a 2-page document. It could be something simple as, you said you were going to disseminate, and I'm coming back to this because this is the one where they fall down most. This is where the area where we need to, as I said, get this expert in. But they're falling down on dissemination. You're saying you're going to disseminate, but you're only saying that you're going to run a conference. That's not enough. You should be looking at things like webinars, or have you ever thought of maybe doing an expert meeting or stakeholders meeting on this? Something like that. That's what practical advice, so that next year when they put them applications in, because they'll come back and they'll say, well, why didn't I get funding? What is the reason? I gave a good application. And in some cases, it just might be that another application was better. That could be the case, that has happened, where we had someone at 70 and someone at 71, and the 71 got funding. Absolutely brilliant applications, but there was just that little bit of a difference in 71. So if that helps,
just another thing that I forgot to mention. These criteria, the 4 criteria, will be in for each of the countries. So you're going to see, let's say, Russia, and then the 4 criteria, China, and the 4 criteria under oath. So bear that in mind, that the same way you're reading the application is the same way it's going to be shown in the oath. Then submit the application. You go under assessment validation and click on submit. Okay, I'm going to move faster on that. It is straightforward once you are in OAT. Most important thing is once you get access to it, go into the criteria and have a look. You can always come back to me if you have any queries on that. Recommendation: write your commentary offline, spell check or word count, because you also have maximum characters to put into your feedback. But yeah, do it offline in Word document so you minimize the risk of losing the data. So once you have that on Word document, you can copy and paste to OAT. So that, I think, is a fair advice, because we had assessors in the past that they lost the data after putting down the comment in OAT, because it doesn't save it automatically, unfortunately. So if you work it offline, it's better for you. I don't know if we have much time for questions, because
that's why we said 45 minutes. So there are, if you need to ask any questions. But again, Mariana is an absolute expert at OAT at this stage. She's gotten so many people through this process, and so she will be delighted to help you through it. She's off for the next couple of days, but we'll be back in the office on Monday. So if there is, I would love to be able to help you, but unfortunately I'm not an expert in OAT, so you would probably end up more confused. So, but we will, the next couple of days should be about reading that briefing information we gave you. If you're not sure about something, come back to me, because I will be in the office for the next couple of days. Get a feel for them. And there's one thing I want to say, and it's the last slide in this, if you might just put it up for me. Erasmus Plus is about people. It's not about paperwork. It's about ensuring that a quality mobility experience for students and staff. So on behalf of the NA, we'd like to thank you for your part in this. But if you keep that in mind as an assessor, that somebody sat down and spent time writing these applications, they may not be the best applications that you've ever seen in your life, but someone has done this. So if we can't give them funding, hopefully we'll be able to give them this feedback. We will use your feedback as well for the external expert that we bring in to do this, and we might ask you to take part in that. We will look at your feedback, bring this to the external assessor and say, this is the areas where our, the applications need to, improve, but we might also come back to you on that. But there's a question now in relation to UNISON, is there a particular priority that should score to our students? No. The quality of the application? No. It's kind of, up to now, we've had more staff than students going. And again, I'd love to say priority to students, but
it's a hard one, because in some cases there are more applications for students, but it is more complicated for students to go out and come in.
You have to think of the visa issue in there. That's a particular, and that's where that Lorenzo's comment at the start about the quality of the kind of the continuous, or not continuous, sorry, Lorenzo's comment about, the duplication of management of it. If you're not seeing if you're having a student come in from Iraq or Iran, it is going to be more difficult for them to get a visa. It is going to take more time. Was that taken into account in this application? So just to be aware of those things. For some teachers, it is like if you're in Palestine, getting out of Palestine is difficult. So just to bear these in mind, can we make should be considered under a new key action?
You could, yeah.
Strong capacity
building aspects.
Please do. If you find someone and you think this is, but it must get through this one as well.
Yeah. Because it is. Sorry, Mary, but it is something that the EU is supporting, and they are trying to track down as well how KA107 projects are developing into capacity building. So it's a nice one, Priva. Thanks. So And then just another thing that we forgot to mention, in some of the regions, the other regions that start with DCI, and I'm going to send that on to you guys, outbound mobilities is mainly for outbound mobility of studies, mainly for postgraduate studies on the third cycle, sorry. Unfortunately, the application does not specify that, but if you see in any of the applications any mention of bachelor students going out
Just
from
note it.
Ireland, just note it to us.
And we look at the eligibility, you know, but they might be sending staff in the same application, so that's why it's not. We don't want to rule it out as ineligible.
Yeah.
We got 16 applications, just to let you know. 4 million for those 16 applications, the budget would be, we would be paying out 4 million. We don't have that type of money. So this is a program for,
No, Fiona, it's just for some specific regions.
Chief wants the mic after that.
Yeah.
Okay.
For example, the DCI ones, and as I said, I'm going to send you the breakdown with the countries and all. Let's say China is a DCI Asia country. Students from Ireland can only go out to China if they are on the third cycle. Sorry, I'm going to give you. Okay, Quiva.
Thanks, Mariana. Sorry, just on that third cycle. So is that only for DCI Asia, or will we receive clarification on that as to, you know, which students can actually go out, you know, whether it be undergraduate or postgraduate or third cycle, and to what regions?
Yeah, quick. The reason why we didn't send out this information is that some institutions just say students. Don't actually give you, so we will make sure that if they are funded, that the information going to the institution will say this is only for postgraduate students.
Yeah.
So some institutions, because the application form, to be fair to applicants, it doesn't specify. You can't, there's no drop down box to say is it fourth cycle, second cycle or third cycle students. So that's not in there. So to be fair to them, if they say students in these areas, we look after that. You just mentioned that in this area they said you know, it's third cycle students. You might put that in your comment box. It is third cycle students, or it's first cycle students, or it's second cycle. Now remember, you're going to have traineeship in there as well this time. Yeah. This is a new aspect of this particular key action. So just put the comment in your comment box, you know, this students first cycle, students second cycle, and we look after it from there.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Just mention and bear in mind that it doesn't necessarily mean that they have mentioned that. It's just if there is any mention.
Yeah.
And it's not just DCI Asia, it's all the DCIs. So DCI Asia, Central Asia, Latin America, Middle East, and South Africa.
And the institutions themselves are kind of aware of this anyway, because it's been, you know, it's come up a number of times, and we do it when we do our information day with them. But rather than, you know, have you weigh down with this, we're just, when they put students in, we would nearly have to sit down and do the qualitative assessment before we gave them to you for eligibility. So it's a practical solution to an improbable problem. That makes any sense. Okay.
That's great. And sorry, just to go back to my other question in relation to recommendations in another key action. So, like, is capacity building kind of a strong aspect of KA107, or should, you know, just in one particular, well, in 3 or 4 different applications within one institution, it is very strongly based around the capacity building within that country. So, you know, it sounds like a much, or sorry, not that just that country, that particular region. So I'm just wondering, should that be something that is kind of redirected, or?
No. The reason for that is you can recommend that the institution apply for a capacity building project, but that doesn't mean that they won't get funding under 107, because they may not have the time they may not want to, because capacity building projects are centralised actions, so they're not just competing with Irish higher education institutions, they're competing with Europe. It's a much bigger project. Not be interested in it, but recommending it might be, you know, planting a seed, but we're not redirecting it to something else. They applied under 107, they're eligible projects, so they will be assessed under 107. They won't be redirected. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Well done anyway. And as I said, if you do find one, or you do think that this might be something that goes under, you know, a strategic partnership or any of the other actions, the key action 3, which is more about policy, but there are some things in there as well. Knowledge alliances, you know, but again, those are big projects, a lot of coordination, and the institution might not just be in the mood to do that for whatever reason. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thanks a million.
I see, Fiona, you have your mic on.
Yeah. Can I just ask again about feedback to per country? So within the applications, are we sort of treating each country almost as a separate project, and therefore we'll need feedback by project per country, so that in each box you might have a heading for each sort of individual project country?
Well, the application itself is based on countries. So Russia is practically an application on its own. China is an application on its own. The application it's in one document, but they are separate, and you have to assess each country as if it was the only application there. Does that make sense? So yes, you are giving feedback for each country, because and especially for the competitive ones, the ones there where you see the score, that's 461 is the over budget. Latin America, yeah. So if you had in there Brazil, and you know you're saying to an institution you're not getting this, but this is what you could do for that, and then within there you have another DCI Latin American country, like Bolivia. My mind went blank. Bolivia. So you're treating that as a separate application. So you're giving feedback on that one as well, because it could be like at the start we were talking about one person writing the whole application for the institution, but that's not the norm. The norm is that, you know, different professors or lecturers or different international offices write the application, you know. So one person could be writing for Bolivia and another person writing for Brazil. So you have to take it, you know, so the person that's writing for Brazil may not apply next year. The person that is applying for Bolivia may. So they will need that feedback. Yeah. I mean, one line of feedback is not enough. No. So if you're writing that, that's not enough for anyone. That's just stating, you know, this is a problem. It's not giving something back. Imagine, as I said at the beginning, imagine that you're that applicant and you wanted to apply next year for this. What would you like to see in your feedback? We have the biggest complaints that institutions give is in this area of feedback, in that it's one line, but what do they mean? You know, and then we have to come back to you. So it might be, hopefully we won't have to come back for many, but we might. But yeah, just to bear that in mind. Yeah. That's really what we can give. Yeah, because I did this 2 years ago where I did this 2 years ago where I read every application. It took me 2 months to do it because I was doing it with work. And it was different. The feedback that, you know, you were given for one could be the same institution but completely different for each country. Now, just before we go, the rate per application, because we haven't put this up because different applications have different workloads and things like that. So for this one, it's €150. So for each application, I think everybody got about three. So for each of those 3 applications, you get €150. It may be subject to tax. That's something that the accounts office and personnel office here will let you know about. If you've never worked in Ireland, then you probably won't be subject to tax. But if you worked in Ireland and you have a PAYE number, then there is, just to bear that in mind. And on behalf of all of my colleagues here, we'd like to thank you very much for agreeing to be part of this, and I know the applicants would want me to thank you on their behalf as well, because as I said, this is not about paperwork, this is about people. So next year there will be a lot of happy people going out on mobilities, all because of the work you're doing here today. Is there any more questions before we
finish the recording and the presentation?
No, thanks, guys.
Okay, great. And again, if you have any questions, please come back to us. You have our emails and our phone. If you don't, Mariana will send out the phone numbers as well, so that you'll have them. And good luck. Okay, take care. Thank you.